A billionaire in a luxury RV, staring at a pile of rocks. On the other side of the parking lot, a single dad is cooking dinner on a rusty camping stove, with 2 slices of bread and a packet of ketchup. Neither of them knows. In the next hour, their lives will quietly change forever. If stories like this warm something in you, maybe consider hitting like or subscribing. No pressure. Just a way to let us know you want more stories like this one. The sound came before the sight, a hollow, uneven rattle that echoed against the empty hills. Dust curled behind an old blue minivan as it dragged itself up the cracked highway slope. The engine coughed like an old smoker refusing to quit. Inside the van, the dashboard light blinked amber. Fuel low. The needle flirted with empty. Ray Carter leaned forward, knuckles tight around the steering wheel. His eyes traced the horizon, scanning for anything that resembled a gas station or a place to stop. There was nothing, just dry earth, skeletal bushes, and sky. A sky that wasn't blue, not really. It was the color of faded steel, heavy, pressed down like the lid of a box. In the rearview mirror, a voice broke the silence. "Dad, are we almost there?" It was soft, half asleep, half hopeful. Ray glanced back. Sophie, 8 years old. Curled against a pile of blankets, her small hand still clutched a stuffed bear missing one ear. Her hair was messy, her face pressed against the window, watching the endless desert slide by like a broken film reel. "Almost," Ray said. Not a lie, not quite the truth. The engine groaned as the van crested the final incline, then relief. A patch of cracked pavement appeared to the right, an old highway rest stop, if you could call it that. A single wooden picnic table sat beneath a crooked pine that shouldn't have survived this heat. A rusted trash can leaned sideways, next to it a water spigot, barely functional by the look of it. But the most noticeable thing wasn't the table or the tree or the broken vending machine leaning against the fence. It was the RV, sleek, white, new, or at least newer than anything else out here, parked with precision, almost too clean for the mess of desert around it. Ray pulled the van toward the far end of the lot, as far from the RV as he could without being rude. The engine sputtered once, twice, then died. Silence fell except for the wind, a constant low whisper like someone breathing right against your ear. He sat there for a moment, hands resting on the wheel. His shoulders sagged. He didn't sigh, not out loud. Out here, there wasn't energy to waste on things like sighing. "Dad, I'm hungry." Sophie again, less sleepy this time, more certain. "I know, kiddo," Ray said, forcing something that resembled a smile. "Let's check the pantry." He opened the driver's side door. Dust swirled in, hot and dry. The wind carried the faint smell of sagebrush and something metallic, the smell of empty places. Sophie scrambled out after him, her sneakers thumping against the concrete. Her gaze drifted to the RV, big, shiny, and mysterious. But she didn't say anything. Ray popped the side door. Inside was what he called the pantry, a red cooler wedged between a pile of blankets and an old toolbox. He flipped it open. Not much left. Half a loaf of bread, 2 eggs in a cardboard holder, a Ziploc bag of sliced turkey that was probably fine, probably. "It's a gourmet night," Ray muttered. "Chef's choice." Sophie giggled, not because it was funny, but because that's what you do when your dad tries to make it okay. He hauled out a foldable stove, dented on one side, and a small propane canister that always seemed more empty than full. The setup wasn't fancy, but it worked. He knew because it had to, as he crouched by the picnic table trying to get the stubborn flame to catch. A flicker of movement pulled his eyes sideways. The RV. He hadn't noticed it before, but now that he looked, the blinds weren't fully closed. Behind the tinted glass, a figure, a woman, watching. Or maybe not watching. Maybe just looking. The difference was subtle, but it was there. Ray turned back to the stove. The lighter clicked. Once. Twice. Flame caught. A small, steady blue tongue of fire hissed against the wind. Sophie dragged out their only camp chair, plopped into it, and pulled her knees to her chest. Her eyes scanned the sky. "Do you think we'll see us tonight?" she asked. Ray glanced up. The clouds were low, heavy, uncertain. He wasn't sure what answer would be kinder. "Maybe," he said, "if the sky decides to be generous." And then he dropped the pan onto the flame. The first faint sizzle of oil hitting metal broke the stillness. For a brief, tiny second, the emptiness around them felt less empty. Inside the RV, the world was perfectly still, insulated from the wind, the dust, and the rest of everything. Soft leather seats, clean counters, cabinets in glossy white. A small espresso machine blinked silently from the corner. A blue light pulsing like it was waiting for someone to press something. But no one did. Elena Brooks sat by the window, not quite in the light, not quite in the shadows. A wool blanket wrapped loosely around her shoulders. Though the RV was plenty warm, her laptop glowed on the table, screen filled with unopened emails. Each subject line was a variation of the same theme. Media request, are you stepping down? Board meeting rescheduled, your input required. Investors concerned, call us. She scrolled past them, slowly, methodically. Her thumb hovered over the trackpad, then moved again. Delete, delete, delete. It wasn't anger, wasn't even defiance, it was inertia. Her reflection stared back from the dark parts of the screen. Hair pulled into a loose braid, face thinner than it used to be. No makeup today, no jewelry. She barely recognized this version of herself. Somewhere in the distance, beyond the sealed window, a faint clang of metal carried through the dry air. The unmistakable pop of a portable stove trying to light. She didn't mean to glance. It just happened. The habit of a lifetime spent scanning, calculating, predicting. Her eyes landed on them. A man, maybe late 30s, early 40s, lean, tired, methodically setting up a tiny camp stove beside an old picnic table. Nearby, a girl, small, maybe 8, bouncing in place, talking to him, laughing at something he said. They were scraping together a meal from nothing, from whatever they had left in a cooler that didn't quite close all the way. Elena pulled the blanket tighter. Her gaze drifted back to the screen. The cursor blinked inside an unfinished draft. A message she'd started 2 days ago but never sent. To board@ethertech.com. Subject, resignation. No body text, just the subject line. Sitting there, mocking her. Her fingers hovered over the keys. She could finish it. 4 sentences, maybe 5, walk away clean. The company she'd built, the empire that had made her rich, famous, envied, all of it now felt irrelevant. The espresso machine beeped once. She hadn't pressed anything. It was just reminding her it existed. She stood, crossed to the machine, and poured herself a cup. The motions were automatic, muscle memory. Coffee flowed into the mug, the same mug she always used out here. White ceramic, a chip on the handle, faded gold letters that once read, "Stay wild." She sipped, bitter, lukewarm. She didn't care. Her eyes drifted back to the window. The man was tending the stove, flame finally steady. The girl sat cross-legged in a camp chair, humming a tune only she could hear. Elena let the blind slip down, not fully closed, just enough. She wasn't watching, not really, just looking. A breath left her, slow, heavy. For the first time in a very long time, the weight in her chest shifted. Not gone, not lighter, just different. She didn't know why, or maybe she did but wasn't ready to admit it. Outside, a faint sizzle rose, the sound of something eggs maybe hitting a hot pan. Inside, the cursor blinked, still waiting, still asking the same quiet question. Finish it, or don't. The pan hissed as Ray cracked 2 eggs into the shallow pool of oil. The yolks slid slightly off-center, threatening to merge. He nudged them apart with the edge of his spatula. "Stay in your own lanes," he muttered under his breath. Sophie sat cross-legged in the only camp chair they owned, her knees pulled tight to her chest. Her sneakers bounced rhythmically. One sole had started to peel at the toe, flapping a little every time it hit the ground. "Dad," she said, chin resting on her knees, "is this, like, our tradition now?" Ray glanced over, wiping his hands on a paper towel. "What do you mean?" "You know," she said, waving a hand around at the battered stove, the dented cooler, the cracked picnic table. "Stopping at places like this, cooking eggs and stuff. Is this family tradition?" Ray smiled, small, tired, but real. He turned the eggs gently, then reached into the cooler, pulled out the last 3 slices of bread, and laid them on the side of the pan to toast. "Yeah," he said after a beat. "I guess it is. Highway gourmet, Carter family style." Sophie grinned, satisfied. "Cool." A breeze kicked up, sending a few dry leaves scuttling across the concrete. Dust swirled briefly around the legs of the picnic table before settling again. From behind the tinted glass of the RV, Elena watched. She hadn't intended to, not really. But something about the way the little girl swung her legs, the way the man crouched by the tiny stove with a kind of practiced care. It pulled at her attention. Not pity, not curiosity. Something else. Something quieter. Ray flipped the bread, checking the undersides for that perfect shade between golden and almost burnt. "Do you think other families have traditions like this?" Sophie asked. "Like, do rich people stop at rest stops and cook eggs too?" Ray snorted. Couldn't help it. "Probably not, kiddo." Sophie tilted her head, thinking. "Yeah, they probably just DoorDash everything." Ray laughed. "Yeah, something like that." Inside the RV, Elena's lips twitched, a ghost of a smile, uninvited. Her gaze drifted to the edges of their setup, the way the man laid things out with quiet efficiency. A plastic tub for clean utensils, another for trash, napkins folded neatly on the corner of the table. Even out here in the middle of nowhere, there was order. Not the kind born from money or convenience, but the kind born from necessity, from someone who's had to make do, more than once. Ray lifted the pan, sliding the eggs and toast onto 2 paper plates. The eggs were slightly overcooked, edges crisp. The bread was unevenly toasted, one corner blackened. "Chef's special," he announced, handing a plate to Sophie with a flourish. She giggled, scooping up a piece of egg with her fork. "Best restaurant on the highway. Don't let the Michelin folks hear that," Ray said, sitting beside her on the bench. For a moment there was only the sound of forks scraping against paper, the occasional crunch of toast, the wind threading softly through the crooked pine. Elena found herself leaning closer to the window, barely realizing she'd done it. One finger absently traced the edge of the blind. The man. Ray, she assumed, laughed at something the girl said, not loud, not showy, just a low, warm sound that seemed to settle into the air like smoke from a fire you didn't realize you missed until it was there. Elena blinked, pulled the blind halfway down, then stopped, left it there. Not closed, not open. A sip of coffee, still bitter, still cold. Her eyes flicked back toward the laptop screen, glowing quietly in the dim interior. The email draft still open, the subject line still waiting, but not now. Her gaze returned to the window, to the man, the girl, the stove, for reasons she couldn't name. She stayed watching. The last bit of egg disappeared from Sophie's plate. A quick swipe of toast mopped up the yolk that had broken free earlier. She sat back, hands on her knees surveying the table like a foreman checking a job site. "Can I do setup, Dad?" she asked. "Like, you know, restaurant style." Ray wiped his hands on his jeans, glanced at her with a smile that carried more weariness than he meant to show. "Yeah, you're in charge." Sophie hopped down from the camp chair, darted to the van's side door and pulled out a battered plastic container. Inside, forks, knives, napkins, all mismatched, most collected from fast food stops over who knows how many states. She set the forks first, teens pointing toward the table's edge, just like she'd seen in the diners they'd stopped at. Napkins folded well, more scrunched than folded and placed underneath. Plastic knives next, handles lined up as best as an 8-year-old could manage. Ray watched, not saying a word. The wind tugged gently at the corners of the napkins, but Sophie pressed them down with small rocks she'd scavenged earlier from the lot. From the window of the RV, Elena watched, too. Not openly, not with the blinds up, but enough. One hand rested lightly against the window frame, thumb absently tracing the edge of the curtain. Her gaze tracked the small girl's hands, the way she smoothed each napkin, even when it wrinkled again the second she let go. The way her mouth pressed into a line of focus, the little hum in her throat as she worked. It wasn't the hum of boredom or habit, it was the hum of a child taking something seriously, a ritual that mattered. Not because anyone else said it should, but because she decided it did. Ray leaned over, adjusted one of the forks by a 1/4 inch, then sat back. "Perfect," he declared. "You might be overqualified for this job." Sophie grinned, pleased. "Do we get tips?" Ray laughed quietly. "Only if the food doesn't kill anybody." Inside the RV, Elena's fingers tightened slightly on the curtain edge. A sharp inhale she didn't notice until it was halfway out of her chest. There was something disarming about it. The smallness of it all. Not small as in insignificant, small as in simple, clear. This wasn't a father distracting his kid with busy work. This was their life. A shared rhythm, a pattern built not from comfort but from necessity. The picnic table itself bore witness to 1,000 other travelers. Names scratched into the wood, a faded heart with the initials M plus J. A crude drawing of what might have once been a bird, now just lines etched deep by someone with time and a pocket knife. Sophie picked up a stick and traced over the heart absent-mindedly. "You think they're still together?" she asked, not really expecting an answer. Ray shrugged. "Hard to say, maybe." "Hope so," she replied, then stood. "Okay, all ready. Chef Ray, the table awaits." Ray gave a theatrical bow, then reached for the cooler again. Inside the RV, Elena let the curtain slip an inch lower. She caught herself before it fell fully closed, half open, half guarded. Her gaze flicked back toward the table, toward the man and the girl and their ridiculous attempt to make a rest stop picnic table into something like home. Her thumb found the edge of the mug in her hand, the chipped ceramic one that always traveled with her, the one with the faded words barely visible now. "Stay wild." She hadn't felt wild in a long time. She wasn't sure she even remembered how. But as the wind shifted again, carrying the faint smell of something frying, something real, something ordinary, she realized she wasn't pulling the curtain shut. Not yet, not this time. The blinds were still half open, but Elena had stopped pretending she wasn't looking. Her coffee had gone cold. The mug sat idle in her hands. Her fingers traced the chipped edge like it was a habit born years ago. Because maybe it was. She turned away from the window as if giving herself permission to stop watching for a moment. The small cabinet by the bench seat creaked as she opened it. Inside, tucked between a frayed journal and a tangle of old charging cables, was a keyring. Not just a keyring, a metal star. 5 points, polished edges dulled by time. A little scratch ran across the surface, invisible unless the light hit it just right. She turned it over in her palm. The back still had the faint outline of a date, almost rubbed away now. March 12th. No year, no explanation, but she knew exactly which year it was. Her thumb brushed the inscription below it. Keep going. A gift, from someone who used to believe in her more than she did herself. Or maybe someone who only knew the version of her she carefully constructed. The woman on the magazine covers, the name attached to billion-dollar mergers. The persona, the image. Elena closed her fingers around the star, held it tight, tighter than necessary. Her gaze shifted sideways toward the small frame that lay face down beside her laptop. She hadn't touched it in weeks, deliberately, but now. She reached for it. Fingers hesitated at the edge. Then, with a breath that felt heavier than it should, she flipped it over. The photo stared back. A man, laughing. His head tilted slightly, eyes squinting against sunlight. His arm slung casually over her shoulder. Her own younger face smiled beside him. Carefree, confident, utterly convinced that everything ahead was permanent. It wasn't. Her thumb drifted over his face, not caressing, not exactly. More like trying to understand how something that real once existed, and then didn't. The sound of laughter drifted in through the glass, not hers, theirs, the little girl Sophie. Elena glanced toward the window but didn't move the blind. Not yet. Instead, she looked back at the star, rolled it once between her fingers. Let the metal catch the thin line of sunlight that slipped between the blinds. Keep going. But going where? And for what? The inbox on her laptop was still open. The resignation email draft still blinked, waiting, but the keys felt heavier than they ever had. Outside, a clatter, a fork hitting the ground, followed by Sophie's giggle and the man's quiet chuckle. Something inside Elena shifted. Not a decision, not yet, but something smaller, a question, a voice in the back of her mind that whispered, "You could open the door." But her fingers didn't move, not yet. She closed the photo frame, gently, turned it face down again. The star, though, she didn't put it back. It stayed in her palm, warm now from her skin. Her thumb traced the words again. Keep going. And for the first time in a very long time, she wondered if that meant something different than it used to. A sudden knock, light, rapid, not the kind adults use. Elena flinched. Her hand tightened instinctively around the star keychain still sitting in her palm. For a second, she just sat there, frozen, half expecting the sound to vanish like everything else out here. But it didn't. Another knock, 2 quick taps, then a pause, then one more just for good measure. She stood, slower than necessary, her body remembering how to brace for whatever this was. Pulling the curtain aside, just a sliver, she saw her. The little girl, standing there, arms tucked behind her back, feet slightly pigeon-toed, looking up at the RV door like it was the entrance to a castle. Elena hesitated. Fingers hovered over the handle. Another beat. Then quietly, so quietly she almost didn't hear it, came the voice. "Hi. Excuse me. Do you have ketchup?" Not demanding, not intrusive, just hopeful, like asking for ketchup was the most normal thing in the world. Elena blinked. Words jammed somewhere between her brain and her mouth. She reached for the handle, twisted. The door hissed as it unsealed, then swung open halfway. Wind rushed in, warm, dry, laced with dust. But the breeze wasn't what made Elena's breath hitch. It was the way the girl smiled, wide, gap-toothed, unbothered, unafraid. "Ketchup?" Sophie repeated, rocking slightly on her heels. "For the eggs. Dad forgot we were out. Happens a lot." For a split second, Elena genuinely considered whether she even owned ketchup. Had she ever? Her fridge was more espresso pods and mineral water than condiments. "I think maybe," she managed, her voice rusty from disuse. "Wait." She disappeared inside, opened the fridge, blinked at the contents like she'd never seen them before. Top shelf, far back, there it was. A squeeze bottle, half full. Expiration date? Probably fine. She grabbed it, stared at it a second longer than needed, then walked back to the door. When she opened it fully this time, Sophie was still there, hands now clasped in front of her, bouncing slightly on the balls of her feet. Elena handed it over. "Here, you can bring it back whenever." Sophie's face lit up like someone had handed her the keys to Disney World. "Thank you. You saved breakfast. Well, dinner. Well, Brinner, I guess." Elena couldn't help it. Her lips twitched. "Brinner?" "Yeah." Sophie nodded seriously. "Breakfast for dinner, it's kind of our thing." "Ah," Elena said. "A family tradition." "Exactly." Sophie grinned, hugging the ketchup bottle against her chest like it was treasure. A pause. A natural moment where the kid should have turned and walked away. But she didn't. Instead, her head tilted slightly, curious. "Do you live in here?" she asked, peeking past Elena's arm. Elena blinked, caught off guard not by the question but by how innocent it was. No judgment, no assumptions, just curiosity, pure and simple. "Yeah," she answered, softer than she intended. "For now." "That's so cool," Sophie said, wide-eyed. "It's like a spaceship or a tiny house on wheels." A small, involuntary laugh slipped out of Elena's throat. Not loud, not practiced, just real. "Something like that," she agreed. From across the lot, Ray's voice floated over, half laughing, half concerned. "Sophie, where'd you run off to?" "Got ketchup," Sophie called back, spinning toward the sound. "The nice lady had some." Ray glanced up, saw the open RV door, saw Elena standing there. His face shifted, not alarmed, not surprised, just guarded. Sophie turned back to Elena. "Do you want to come eat with us? If you're hungry, I mean, Dad made extra, sort of." Elena stood there, stunned, mouth slightly open. No one had asked her that in, she didn't even know how long. The words tangled. "Maybe another time." Sophie nodded like that was the most reasonable answer in the world. "Okay, thanks again." She skipped back across the lot, ketchup bottle swinging in her hand like a trophy. Elena watched her go, hand still resting on the edge of the door. Her fingers tapped the metal absently, unsure whether to close it again or not. She didn't. Not yet. The ketchup bottle sat on her kitchen counter, right where Sophie had left it, tiny fingerprints still smudged around the label. Elena stood there, one hand resting on the countertop, the other loosely wrapped around the chipped mug, empty now, but still warm from the habit of holding it. Through the narrow window she could see them. Ray was crouched by the stove, stirring something in a battered pan. The way his shoulders moved, the tension in his arms, even from here spoke of someone used to doing things the hard way. Sophie bounced nearby, adjusting forks on the table again, smoothing napkins that refused to stay folded. Her voice floated over, soft but clear. "Dad, do you think she'll come?" Ray didn't answer right away, just stirred the pan a little longer. Then, without looking up, he said, "Maybe." Simple, honest, no pressure in it, just a door cracked open. Elena's hand hovered over the ketchup bottle. Her thumb brushed the sticky edge where the label was starting to peel. It would be easier not to. Easier to slide the door shut, draw the blinds, and disappear back into the safe, curated emptiness of her own world. She'd been practicing that for months now, but the quiet out here wasn't quiet anymore. It carried things, like the sound of Sophie's laughter, or the clatter of a fork hitting the concrete, or the low hum of a man's voice, steady, measured, grounding. Her fingers tightened around the bottle. Just return it. That's all. Nothing more. Just basic courtesy, a transaction, an exchange, one item for another. No different than sending an email or signing a contract, right? The door handle was cool under her palm. It clicked louder than she expected when she pulled it open. Warm air swept in. Not uncomfortable, just real. Carried on, it was the faint smell of something frying, maybe potatoes or eggs again. Elena stepped down, one foot, then the other. The gravel crunched beneath her sneakers. Sophie saw her first. The girl's head snapped up, her face instantly splitting into a grin wide enough to power a small town. "She came!" Ray looked over. His expression was harder to read, something between surprise and caution. His hands paused mid-stir, not defensive, not cold, just careful. Elena walked slowly, ketchup bottle tucked against her hip like it might shield her somehow. She stopped a few feet from the table, not too close, not too far. "I figured, this belongs to you," she said. Her voice didn't sound like hers, not the version used in boardrooms, on magazine covers, or TED stages. Sophie bounced forward, reaching for the bottle. "Thank you. You didn't have to bring it over to... You could have, just waved or something." Elena smiled, small, hesitant. "Yeah, I guess." An awkward beat, not heavy, just unsure. Ray cleared his throat, stood, wiped his hands on his jeans. "We've got, extra if you're hungry." His voice was steady, neutral, an offer without expectation. Elena glanced at the table. 2 paper plates already set, a third one off to the side, not placed yet, but there. Like maybe someone had thought about it, or maybe it was just where the forks ended up. She didn't answer right away. Instead, her gaze drifted upward. The sky had started to shift, less gray now, more open, a soft band of pale blue pushing through the clouds at the horizon. She looked back at Sophie. The girl was watching her, not impatient, just open, the way only kids know how to be. Then Elena exhaled, not quite a sigh, more like something she hadn't realized she'd been holding finally letting go. "Yeah," she said quietly, I could eat." Sophie cheered, immediately darting to the table to adjust the plates. "We get a guest! Dad, you gotta do the chef intro now!" Ray chuckled under his breath. "Pretty sure that's not a rule." "It is now," Sophie declared. Elena's smile grew, almost against her will. She stepped closer, crossed that invisible line between watching and being seen. The meal wasn't much. Scrambled eggs, a little overcooked at the edges, pan-fried potatoes, some perfectly crisp, others barely golden. A few slices of toast, unevenly browned. But on that worn picnic table beneath the dimming sky, it felt enough. Sophie took the seat nearest the stove, her legs swinging beneath the bench, feet not quite touching the ground. She'd placed the ketchup right in the center of the table, like it was the crown jewel of the meal. Ray sat opposite her, shoulders relaxed but not entirely. One eye always flicked toward Elena, not in suspicion, just measuring, adjusting. And Elena, after a beat longer than necessary, lowered herself onto the far bench, careful, deliberate, like someone testing the weight of a bridge before crossing. For a few seconds, no one spoke, not awkward, not yet. Just the kind of silence that comes when 3 people share space for the first time, and nobody wants to press too hard. Sophie was the first to move. She reached for the ketchup, squeezed a crooked line over her eggs, then slid it wordlessly toward Elena. Elena blinked, then smiled small, but real. Thanks. She copied the motion. A line of ketchup, slightly neater. It felt strange and oddly grounding. Ray passed her a paper plate, then nodded toward the pan. Help yourself. She did, slowly, a modest scoop of eggs, a handful of potatoes, no more than what felt polite. The plastic fork felt foreign in her hand, flimsy, almost weightless, but the first bite tasted warm, a little salty, a little burnt, perfectly imperfect. Above them, the sky shifted from gray to something deeper indigo, brushed with the faintest streaks of pink where the clouds had broken. No music, no background noise. Just the soft whisper of wind threading through the brittle trio, and the occasional pop from the stove as oil cooled. Sophie broke the silence first, as kids often do, not because it was uncomfortable, but because wonder can't stay quiet forever. Do RVs have bathtubs? She asked, mouth full of potato. Elena laughed before she could stop herself, a sound that startled her more than anyone else, soft, unpolished, honest. No, she replied, shaking her head. Tiny showers, about the size of a closet. If you turn the wrong way, you hit your elbow. Sophie giggled. That's kinda awesome. Ray chuckled under his breath. Depends who you ask. Another stretch of quiet, but this time, lighter. A bird somewhere in the trees called once, then twice. The sound echoed, soft and hollow. Elena glanced around the table. Her eyes caught on the small details, the way Ray's fingers absently spun his fork when he wasn't using it. The way Sophie carefully pushed the burned edges of toast to the side of her plate but didn't complain. None of this was polished. None of it was planned. But it was real. The kind of real money couldn't buy. She found her shoulders easing, the tight coil in her chest loosening. Not gone, but quieter. Ray poured water from an old thermos into 3 mismatched cups. No wine glasses, no tablecloth, just what was needed. Sophie tapped her spoon against her cup. This is the best dinner ever. Ray smiled, glancing toward Elena. She says that about pretty much any meal outdoors. Sophie grinned. It's true, though. Elena caught herself smiling again, softer this time. Her gaze drifted toward the horizon, where the first star blinked weakly through the thinning clouds. A breeze passed, cool but not cold. It carried the smell of dust and something else, something quieter, something like comfort. No one said much after that, and no one needed to. They just ate. 3 strangers sitting at a broken table in the middle of nowhere, sharing a meal that wasn't special by any recipe, but mattered anyway. Because sometimes the most important meals are the quiet ones. The dishes were cleared, paper plates stacked, forks wiped clean with napkins and tossed into the trash bag tied to the side of the table. Sophie was busy collecting pebbles by the edge of the parking lot, narrating some imaginary game under her breath, her world briefly entirely her own. Ray knelt by the cooler, reorganizing the contents. The hum of the fading stove mixed with the soft rasp of wind through the brittle pines. Elena stood nearby, arms loosely crossed, her gaze drifting toward the horizon where the sky was folding into shades of navy and deep violet. Then something shifted, a soft shuffle, a whisper of paper against concrete. Ray looked down. A folded newspaper had slipped from between the thermos and the napkin roll, probably stashed there from an old gas station stop days ago. He hadn't noticed it in a while, hadn't cared. But now, it lay face up, and there it was, her face. Not the woman standing 5 feet away, but the version the world knew. The photograph was crisp, polished. A headshot, Elena in a tailored blazer, her hair perfectly arranged, her gaze direct, confident, controlled. The headline beneath it read, "Billionaire financier Elena Marlowe vanishes, board in crisis." Ray stared. The silence around the table snapped tight, not broken, not filled, just tense. His fingers didn't move, didn't pick it up, didn't shove it away, just stayed, hovering as if touching it would confirm something he wasn't ready to understand. Elena's eyes followed his, then stopped, froze. For a second, maybe less, neither of them spoke. Neither breathed. Her arms tightened across her chest, not defensive exactly, but bracing. Her fingers dug slightly into the fabric of her sleeve, knuckles whitening. Ray's jaw tensed. His posture didn't change, but his eyes did. The steady, calm gaze from before sharpened. Not hostile, not yet, but cautious, measured. He lifted the newspaper slowly, turned it over, scanning the front page, as if hoping absurdly that maybe it wasn't what it clearly was, but it was. There was no mistaking it, no mistaking her, no mistaking the words beneath her picture. Where is she now? Ray looked up, met her eyes. Not a glare, not anger, but something heavier, something slower. The kind of silence between two people who both realize at the exact same moment that they've been standing on very different sides of the line. Elena opened her mouth. No words came. Her throat worked around a breath that didn't feel like it fit anymore. But it died there. Because what do you even say? That it's not what it looks like? That you were someone else once? Or still are? Or maybe don't even know anymore? Ray didn't ask. Not yet. He just folded the newspaper once, then again deliberate. Controlled, then set it down on the corner of the table. The sound it made, thin paper against splintered wood, felt louder than it should have. His voice, when it came, was quiet, low, even. You should have said something. No accusation, no heat, just fact. Elena's mouth opened again, closed. Her fingers rubbed at the star keychain still tucked inside her palm as if it could ground her. I wasn't hiding, she managed, then caught herself. No, that's a lie. I was, just not from you. From everything else. Ray didn't flinch, didn't nod, just watched. A long, thin stretch of silence pulled between them. Sophie's voice cut through it, light, unaware. Dad, look! I found a rock that looks like a heart! Neither adult moved. Neither answered. For a second longer, they just stood. Two strangers who weren't strangers a minute ago and now didn't quite know what they were. The hiss of water filled the quiet. Ray stood by the pump sink, sleeves rolled, hands moving with the muscle memory of someone who's done this routine 1,000 times before. A cracked enamel basin sat beneath the spout, suds gathered, thin and weak, but enough to do the job. A plate, a fork, another plate, wiped, rinsed, stacked. Elena stood a few feet away, arms crossed, not watching the dishes exactly, but not looking anywhere else either. The air between them wasn't hostile, but it wasn't easy either. The newspaper was gone now, folded, tucked out of sight, but not forgotten. Sophie was somewhere just out of earshot, narrating her rock-collecting adventure to an audience of nobody. Her small voice drifted on the wind. Ray didn't look up. Didn't think billionaires did their own dishes. The words weren't sharp, not sarcastic, just placed there, like a stone on the table between them. Elena's fingers tightened slightly around her elbows. We don't, she replied, quiet. Or didn't. Another plate, another rinse. He set it in the drying rack made of 2 sticks and a bungee cord. You running from something? He asked. Simple, direct, not aggressive. Elena exhaled, not quite a sigh. More like surrender. Yeah. Her gaze dropped to the gravel. Everything. Ray nodded, slow, wiped his hands on a threadbare towel. Fair enough. The wind shifted, carrying the faint smell of damp pine and cooling grease. A lone cricket started up somewhere, testing the air. I didn't expect to see myself like that, she murmured. On that page, like some missing person poster for a version of me I don't even recognize anymore. Ray didn't answer right away. He picked up the last fork, washed it, let the water drip free before setting it aside. Then he leaned both hands on the edge of the sink, elbows locked, head tilted down but eyes glancing sideways toward her. My wife used to say, his voice paused, caught briefly, that the world has a way of deciding who we are, even when we don't agree. Elena looked over, surprised, not by the words, but by the fact that he said them at all. What happened to her? She asked, gentle, not prying. Ray's thumb traced the chipped edge of the basin. Cancer? Fast. Unfair, but that's how it goes sometimes. A silence, heavy but not suffocating, just full. I'm sorry, Elena said softly. Yeah, Ray replied, glancing at the horizon. Me too. The water slowed to a drip, then stopped. He wiped his hands, didn't move toward her, didn't step back either. So, he said finally, you gonna tell me why a woman like you ends up out here, middle of nowhere, asking strangers for ketchup? Elena's lips pressed into something between a smile and a grimace, because the somewhere I was before didn't feel like somewhere anymore. Ray nodded, not like he understood it completely, but like he recognized the shape of it. Funny thing, he said, folding the towel. The middle of nowhere's got more people in it than you'd think. For the first time all evening, Elena let out a real breath. Her arms loosened. Her shoulders dropped an inch. She glanced toward the table where Sophie's tiny collection of heart-shaped rocks was starting to form a crooked circle. Yeah, Elena whispered. I'm starting to notice that. The air had softened, not completely, but enough. A breeze rolled through the rest stop, tugging at the edges of paper napkins and sending a few dry leaves skating across the concrete. Sophie knelt near the edge of the lot, hands dusty, jeans streaked with dirt. Her brows furrowed in deep concentration as she carefully arranged the small collection of pebbles and rocks she'd gathered earlier. 5 larger stones formed the outer points. Smaller ones curved between them, shaping lines, angles, and imperfect symmetry. A star, not perfect, not even, but a star nonetheless. Elena watched her, arms now uncrossed, leaning slightly against the RV. Something in her chest tugged, something quieter than guilt, gentler than fear. Ray noticed it too. His eyes flicked between Sophie's tiny hands, carefully nudging a stone half an inch this way. Then back, and the woman standing silently nearby. Sophie bit her lip, tongue poking out just a little as she adjusted the top point. Then she sat back on her heels, grinning. Look, she called. It's a star like the ones that are supposed to be in the sky, but, you know, the clouds. Elena stepped closer, hands slipping into her pockets. It's beautiful, she said softly. You made that yourself? Yep, Sophie beamed. I like stars. Dad says even when you can't see them, they're still there. Her fingers brushed a pebble that had started to roll out of place. She nudged it back, gentle but determined. I think, Sophie added, sometimes you just have to make your own when the sky forgets to show you. Ray let out a soft chuckle, the kind that came from somewhere deeper than amusement. He crouched beside her, adjusting one edge. This one needs a little help, he said, pushing a stone back into line. Elena knelt too, slowly, almost awkward. But her hands found a stray rock nearby and placed it next to one of the inner lines without thinking too hard about it. Sophie noticed, smiled wider. See? It's better with more hands. The wind picked up, but the star held, a fragile, messy constellation drawn not in the sky, but in dust and stone, a quiet wrapped around them. Not tense this time, not uncertain, just still together. Sophie leaned back on her hands, squinting at her creation. I think I'm gonna leave it here. So if someone else stops, they know someone was here. Someone made something. Elena's throat tightened in a way she didn't expect. Yeah, she whispered, I think that's a pretty good idea. Nobody said much after that. Not because there was nothing to say, but because sometimes silence says it better. The wind picked up first, not violent, just insistent. A steady push against the trees, sending dry leaves scuttling across the lot like nervous crabs. Then came the dust, fine, sharp, the kind that stings when it catches your eyes. Ray glanced up at the sky. Gray was folding into something heavier. Looks like it's coming in quick. Sophie didn't miss a beat. Can we go in the RV? Her eyes lit up like she was asking to tour a spaceship. Elena hesitated for half a second. Then she nodded, thumb flicking the key fob clipped to her jeans. The RV's side door slid open with a quiet pneumatic hiss. Yeah, she said. Come on in. Sophie was through the door before anyone else could move. Her boots thunked softly against the glossy floor and her gasp filled the space instantly. Whoa! She spun, arms out like an airplane, eyes wide, drinking in every corner. The sleek white cabinets, the recessed lighting, the buttery leather seating that wrapped around the dining nook. This is like a tiny mansion on wheels. Elena followed, laughing before she realized she was laughing. Not polite, not restrained. A real laugh. The sound startled her more than anyone else. It's functional, she said, brushing hair from her face. Mostly. Sophie flopped onto the couch, bouncing once, then twice, like testing a trampoline. Does the bed really come out of the wall? Yep. Elena pointed toward a panel. That button drops it down, but don't press it, unless you want me yelling. Sophie giggled, hands tucked behind her back. Noted. Ray stepped inside last, slower. His eyes scanned everything, not with judgment, but with quiet calculation. Like a man used to fixing things, already noting where wires might run, where a hinge might stick, where repairs would eventually be needed. This is nice, he said. Careful, neutral, not impressed, not dismissive. Elena caught the tone, smiled anyway. You can say ridiculously over the top. I won't be offended. Sophie, meanwhile, was already peeking into the mini kitchen. You have a real oven, and a fridge, and, wait, is that an espresso machine? It is. Elena leaned against the counter, arms crossing but looser this time. Though, I don't actually use it much anymore. Why not? Sophie blinked. Elena glanced toward the window where the first drops of rain began ticking against the glass. Because, I guess some things stop mattering when you're not rushing everywhere all the time. Ray settled into the booth seat by the table. His hands rested on the edge. His shoulders relaxed just slightly. Must have been a pretty fast life, he said, voice quieter now. Elena didn't answer right away. She traced a thumb along the seam of the countertop. Yeah, faster than I thought, until it stopped. Outside, the wind shifted, now carrying the distinct rhythm of rain. Not heavy, not angry, just steady, wrapping the RV in a soft cocoon of white noise. Sophie tucked her legs beneath her on the couch. This is so cool. If I lived here, I'd pretend it was a spaceship every day. Elena laughed again, softer this time. You wouldn't be the first person who thought that. For a moment, it was easy to forget the heaviness from before. The newspaper, the questions. the edges of different worlds trying to decide if they could overlap. Inside this small moving house, the lines blurred. There was only warmth and laughter and the gentle, persistent sound of rain. The first gust hit like a slap, sharp, dry, full of grit. It rattled the RV's awning, sent a loose paper napkin spinning into the air like a wounded bird. Elena was the first to register it, not just wind, but the kind that came with warning. Her eyes shot toward the western sky where the horizon had shifted from pale gray to something darker, thicker. A wall of brown, churning like smoke, but heavier. "Dust storm," she said, almost to herself. Her fingers already moving, flicking switches near the door. The awning hissed as it retracted. Sophie jolted upright on the couch. "What's that noise?" Ray stood scanning the sky through the RV's window, his jaw set, calm but focused. "That," he said, "is the sound of getting inside. Fast." Outside, the wind howled louder. Pebbles skipped across the concrete. Somewhere near the tree line, a trash can lid tumbled end over end, clanging like a bell gone mad. "Come on," Elena said sharply, her voice firm but not panicked. She reached for Sophie's hand, tugging her gently but insistently toward the back of the RV. "Away from the windows." Sophie didn't argue. Her fingers slipped into Elena's, small and trusting. Ray threw open the side door of his van, hands moving fast. Grabbing the camp stove, the folding chair, anything loose. He shoved them inside without ceremony, then yanked the door shut. The storm was faster than he'd guessed, faster than any he'd seen in years. A second gust slammed through, sending sand in sheets, stinging, abrasive. It felt alive, hungry. Ray dashed toward the RV, head ducked, one hand shielding his face. Gravel scattered beneath his boots as the first wave of dust swallowed the far end of the lot. Elena hit the door control. It slid open with a hiss just as Ray reached it. He stepped inside, slamming it shut behind him. The seal caught, dulling the roar outside to a deep, muffled growl. For a moment, nobody spoke. The RV rocked, just slightly. A sound like 1,000 fingers scraping against metal filled the air. Sand, dust, wind. Elena locked the door, then double-checked it. Her hands moved by instinct, hitting every latch, every seal. "It's airtight enough," she muttered. "Should hold." Sophie peered out the narrow strip of glass by the dining booth. "It's like the whole world disappeared." She wasn't wrong. Beyond the window was nothing, just swirling brown, no trees, no sky, no ground, just movement, just noise. Ray pressed a hand against the window frame, steadying himself as the RV gave another small lurch. "Never liked desert storms," he muttered. "Too quiet and too loud, all at once." Elena exhaled, finally letting her shoulders drop a little. "It'll pass, usually quick, but it hits hard." Sophie turned, eyes wide. Have you been in one before?" Elena nodded, sliding down onto the cushioned bench. "A couple, not by choice." Her fingers tapped nervously against her knee. "They always make you feel small, like the world's reminding you who's really in charge." The RV shuddered again, less violently this time. The worst of the gust had passed, but the air was still thick, heavy with static and sound. Sophie crawled into Elena's side without asking. Just fit herself there. Small hands curling into Elena's sweater. Elena blinked, stiffened for a half-second, then relaxed, an arm wrapped instinctively around Sophie's shoulder. Protective, unthinking. Ray watched from across the booth, watched how naturally that happened, how surprising it looked. Even to Elena herself, the wind screamed once more, then started to settle. Not gone, but quieter. Ray leaned back, rubbing his jaw. "Guess we're waiting this one out. Together." Nobody disagreed. The storm had settled, but not gone. Outside, the wind softened into a low, constant hum. Rain ticked against the roof, steady, rhythmic. A kind of white noise that wrapped the RV in something that felt safe. Inside, the lights were dimmed, not for mood, just because it felt right. Sophie had dozed off, half curled on the couch, a throw blanket pulled over her shoulders. One arm dangled off the cushion, her fingers loosely wrapped around the stuffed owl she'd carried since Idaho. Ray sat at the dining booth, hands wrapped around a chipped mug. Not coffee, just hot water with the last of a lemon wedge floating in it. Elena sat opposite, legs folded beneath her, shoulders tucked into the corner like someone trying to take up less space than they actually did. For a while, neither spoke. Not because there wasn't anything to say, but because it took time to decide whether to say it. Elena's eyes traced the pattern of rain sliding down the window. Her fingers played absently with the star-shaped keychain, spinning it in slow, restless circles. "You ever," she said finally, voice barely louder than the wind, "wake up one day and realize the life you built wasn't actually yours?" Ray didn't answer. Not yet, just waited. She let the silence stretch, then filled it. For 10 years, I was on every list that mattered. Top under 30, 40 under 40, fastest growing fund, most influential woman in tech, you name it. They printed it. Her lips curled, not a smile, something sharper. I had the penthouse, the corner office, a car I never drove because someone else always parked it for me. There were dinners, endless, with people who smiled like knives. Her fingers stopped spinning the keychain. And one day, her voice dipped lower. One day I walked into a meeting, sat at a glass table with men who'd known me since I was 25. Watched them nod, smile, say words like family, Deutsch, loyalty, door, partnership. She swallowed. And found out that while I was building their empire, they were quietly, selling mine. Ray's jaw tightened, barely, a flicker of recognition, not in the details, but in the shape of betrayal. Contracts signed behind my back, transfers, shares shifted like erasing someone without even bothering to tell them. Her nails tapped the tabletop, not fast, not angry, just there. When I confronted them, they said it was just business, that I'd understand because that's how the game works. Her voice faltered, and for the first time, I realized I didn't want to play anymore. Ray's thumb rubbed along the rim of his mug. He nodded slow, not like approval, more like, "I hear you." Elena breathed, not a sigh, not relief, just breath, the kind that feels heavier coming out than going in. I packed a bag, walked out, left the keys, the titles, the everything. Her fingers tugged at the corner of the blanket covering Sophie's feet. She hadn't even realized she was doing it. And for 3 months I've been driving, no plan, no destination, just away. She glanced up then, met his gaze. Steady, not defensive, not pleading, just open. For a while, it felt like freedom. Her voice softened. But lately, it just feels like running. Ray set his mug down, leaned back, studied her for a moment that felt longer than it was, then quiet, low, even. "Yeah," he said, "I know that feeling." Nothing more, no questions, no advice, no judgment, just that. And somehow, that was enough. Sophie had surrendered to sleep. Her breaths were slow, even. The kind only children have, the kind that says, for now the world is safe. The storm still whispered outside, not gone, just quieter. Like it had run out of reasons to scream. Inside the RV, the air held a different kind of quiet, not awkward, not heavy, just full. Ray sat by the window, elbows on the table, hands cupped around a mug that had long gone cold. He wasn't drinking anymore, just holding it. Elena sat across from him. Not stiff like before, not guarded. One leg tucked beneath her, her back pressed against the padded wall of the booth. Neither spoke. They both stared out at the same window, watched the blur of sand, the soft tap of rain, the occasional flicker of headlights from some poor soul braving the road. A long time passed that way. Or maybe it wasn't long. Time feels different when no one's filling it with noise. Ray shifted first. Not much. Just leaned back slightly, eyes still on the swirling dark. You know, his voice was low, rough around the edges. There was a time I thought standing still was the same as quitting. Elena didn't respond. Just let him have the space, let the words find their shape. So when? His fingers tightened on the mug. When Claire got sick, I kept moving. Figured if I kept fixing things, kept doing, I wouldn't have to sit with it. A breath, slow, careful. Didn't work. Elena's gaze didn't leave the window. It never does, she said softly. Ray nodded. Quiet agreement. No surprise, no resentment. Just truth. She was gone in 6 months. His voice didn't crack, didn't falter, just existed. And after that, it was me and Soph. The wind outside pressed against the glass. Not hard, just enough to remind them it was still there. Sold the house, the truck, most of what we owned. Took what I knew, turning wrenches, fixing engines, and figured the road was as good a place as any. His eyes drifted to Sophie, curled beneath her blanket. A corner of her stuffed owl poked out near her chin. Didn't have a plan past away. A silence settled again, but different this time, softer, warmer. Elena shifted, rested her chin on her knee, arms wrapped around her leg. Funny, she said quietly, how away feels like a destination, until it doesn't. Ray smiled, barely, but it was there. Yeah. Outside, the rain ticked slower now. The worst had passed. The world beyond the window started hinting at shapes again. Faint outlines of trees, the curve of the lot, the distant glow of highway lights. Neither of them moved to turn on the radio, or check the time, or say something to fill the air. Because for the first time in a long time, maybe longer than either of them cared to admit, silence didn't feel like being alone. It felt like company. Ray leaned his head back, eyes half closed. Storm's letting up. Elena nodded, voice barely above a whisper. Yeah. But neither of them moved, because for now, this was enough. The world smelled different after a storm, crisp, clean, a little like wet earth, and a little like something starting over. Ray crouched near the back of the van, folding the tarp that had been useless against the wind, but still deserved to be packed neatly. His hands moved with the same quiet efficiency as always, methodical, steady. Sophie was helping in her own way, gathering stray plastic forks, bundling napkins, and stacking the chipped bowls into a crate with exaggerated care. Her boots thudded softly against damp gravel. Neither of them spoke much. Morning had that kind of hush. The sky was pale gold now, clouds stretched thin like pulled cotton, letting sunlight pool across the lot in patches. Elena stood a few feet away, not helping, not leaving, just watching. Her fingers rolled the star-shaped keychain between her palms again and again like some nervous little meditation. The metal was warm from her touch, cool where her thumb hadn't pressed. She told herself she was only watching to make sure they got out okay, that once they drove off, she'd drive too. Somewhere, anywhere. But the knot in her chest said otherwise. Sophie knelt near the folding table, brushing sand off the legs before Ray collapsed it down. Her hair was messy, her jacket crooked on one shoulder. But her grin was wide, easy. "Dad," she chirped. "Look, the star's still there." Ray glanced toward the dusty corner where last night's pebble star had survived, mostly intact. A few stones had shifted, but the shape was still clear. "Yeah," he said, smiling. "Guess some things hold up better than we think." Elena's throat tightened. She looked away, pretended to check something on her phone that wasn't even turned on. Ray slid the table into the back of the van, then stood wiping his hands on his jeans. He caught Elena's gaze, not directly, more like halfway. A glance that asked something but didn't expect an answer. "You two heading out?" Elena asked, voice light, too light. Ray nodded, slamming the hatch closed. "Yeah, storm passed. Time to move." "Where to?" He shrugged. "West, east, wherever the van makes it." Sophie popped up beside him, hugging a worn backpack to her chest. "Dad says as long as the wheels turn, the road's still good." Elena smiled, but it was thin around the edges. "That's poetic." Her fingers tightened on the keychain, pressed the star into her palm until it almost hurt. The wind was softer this morning, almost playful, tugging at Ray's collar, flicking stray strands of Elena's hair across her face. There was a pause, the kind that stretches just a second too long, where someone should say something, but no one's sure what it is. Sophie broke it first. "Can we, maybe, see your RV again before we go?" Her voice was tentative, hopeful. Elena blinked, looked at her, then at Ray, then back at the small girl standing there with her backpack hugged tight, trying to look casual and failing miserably. "Yeah," Elena said softly. "Yeah, you can." But her hands stayed closed around the keychain, and her feet didn't move, because something had shifted, quietly, subtly, like the air after a storm, and now, neither driving away nor staying felt simple anymore. The wind shifted again, gentle this time, almost playful. Sophie wandered toward the edge of the lot, half skipping, half stomping through shallow puddles left behind by the storm. Ray didn't stop her. His hands were still busy tightening a bungee cord across the back of the van. His eyes followed her, though. Always quiet, steady, near the tree line where the gravel faded into stubborn patches of grass, something caught Sophie's eye. A flash of worn metal half buried under wet sand and leaves. She knelt, dug with both hands. Fingers scraped mud away until it loosened, groaning as it came free. It was a sign. Rust crept along the edges, but the letters were still there, faded but legible. The last turn. Beneath that, in smaller script, Kuk-kwa-koi. Sophie tilted her head, studying it. Her reflection wobbled across the damp, peeling surface. "Elena," she called, lifting the sign as high as her arms could reach. "Look what I found." Elena turned. Brows lifted, she stepped over, brushing her hands on her jeans. "Where did that come from?" Sophie grinned. "It was hiding." She spun it around, showing both sides. One was more rust than paint. The other still held its faded white letters against green. "What do you think it means?" she asked, turning the sign toward Elena like it was a riddle waiting to be solved. Elena crouched, resting her elbows on her knees. Her fingers traced the words without quite touching them. "The last turn," she murmured. "Sounds like the last choice, or maybe the place where everything changes." Sophie nodded solemnly. "Yeah, like in stories, when people decide something really big." Ray walked over, wiping his hands on an old rag. That thing must have been part of some old road marker, or maybe a diner. He smiled, small but genuine. "Hope it wasn't a warning." Sophie laughed. "No, I think it's a good sign." She held it against her chest, hugging it like it was treasure. Like Sometimes you think it's the end, but it's really just the last turn before something better. The words hung there, longer than they probably should have. Ray met Elena's eyes across Sophie's head. Neither of them spoke, but something flickered between them. Acknowledgement, and maybe something else neither was ready to name. Elena stood, brushing dirt from her hands. Well, guess it's yours now. Sophie beamed. I'm gonna put it in the van. Ray ruffled her hair. Go on then. Make it official. As Sophie trotted off toward the van, the sign bumping against her knees, Ray and Elena stood side by side, watching her go. Neither said it out loud, but both felt it. Maybe this wasn't the last turn at all. Maybe it was the first. The van doors were latched, straps tightened. The last crate slid into place. It should have felt like the end of something. It didn't, not quite. Elena stood near the RV's steps, one hand curled around the metal frame, the other spun the star keychain slowly over and over. Ray dusted his palms, then wiped them on the side of his jeans. His eyes flicked toward her, then away, then back again. Well, he started, voice a shade too even. Guess we should get rolling. Yeah, Elena echoed. Her grip tightened on the doorframe. Makes sense. Road's clear now. Neither moved. Sophie skipped between them, oblivious to the gravity adults wrapped around moments like this. Her hands still clutched the rusty "the last turn" sign, now wedged carefully behind the driver's seat of the van like a souvenir. Or maybe a declaration. She plopped down onto the same patch of gravel where last night's pebble star still lingered, half-washed by rain but stubbornly visible. Hey, she chirped, scooping a handful of damp stones. Can we make another one? A new star? For today? Ray half smiled. Sweetheart, we gotta hit the road. Sophie didn't pout, not really, but her hands slowed, fingers trailing through the pile. Just a little one? She asked, tilting her head toward Elena. Maybe, if she helps. The words hung there, not heavy, but real. Elena opened her mouth, closed it. The keychain spun faster between her fingers. Ray didn't say anything, just watched her. Steady, careful. The way a man watches something fragile, half expecting it to break, half hoping it won't. Elena shifted her weight, looked down, then at Sophie, then slowly back to Ray. Her voice caught. She cleared her throat. I probably should get going too. Miles to cover, you know how it is. Ray nodded. Once. Yeah, I do. But neither of them moved. Sophie stared up. Or, she started, fingers curling around a perfectly round pebble. Or maybe it's not the last turn yet. Her eyes flicked between them, wide, innocent, but not clueless. Kids always know more than we think. Elena's fingers stilled on the keychain. Her thumb pressed into the cool, smooth edge of the metal star just enough to feel it. Not enough to hurt. I could, she said quietly, eyes on Sophie now, but her words wrapped around something bigger. I could stay for one more star. Ray didn't smile, not fully, but something softened at the corners of his mouth. Yeah, he said. I guess the road can wait. A little? Sophie beamed, dropped to her knees. Okay, you get the pointy ones. I'll get the round ones, Dad. You help with the middle. Ray chuckled. Didn't realize I got promoted to middle management. Elena laughed. For real this time. Not a surprised laugh. Not nervous, just a laugh. Easy, light. And as they knelt together, 3 pairs of hands brushing dirt, nudging stones, sketching another imperfect stir into the earth, the weight of goodbye drifted. Not gone, just postponed. Because maybe, sometimes, the road isn't about leaving. Maybe it's about knowing when to stay. The gas station was the kind that barely held itself together. Faded signs, cracked pavement, a sun-bleached soda machine that hadn't worked since the Clinton years. Ray pulled the van alongside the pump. The nozzle clicked into place. Gas flowed with a steady hum, the meter ticking upward too fast for his liking. Sophie had darted inside, clutching a crumpled $5 bill, already planning which juice box and questionable snack would win her affection this morning. Elena stayed by the RV, fiddling with something in the side compartment. Her back was turned, half-focused, half pretending not to notice how Ray kept glancing her way. He stepped inside the station mostly for coffee, maybe a pack of gum. Something about road trips made gum feel like necessity. The bell above the door gave a tired jingle. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead. It smelled like burnt coffee, old tires, and something faintly sweet. Ray's boots echoed against the chipped tile as he passed the counter, scanned the racks. Chips, beef jerky, mints. Then he stopped. Near the register, a wire magazine rack, mostly tabloids, UFO sightings. Miracle diets doctors hate. And then center slot, a glossy cover, her face, Elena Warren. Not the Elena from the RV. Not the one who laughed, half awkward as she built pebble stars with Sophie. This Elena wore a tailored suit, perfect hair, eyes sharp, smile, polished, curated. Above her photo in bold serif letters, The Disappearance of Tech's Golden Woman. Beneath it, a subtitle, Where Did Elena Warren Go Inside the Sudden Vanishing of a Billionaire Powerhouse? Ray stared. For a second. Everything in the store went quiet. No hum from the cooler, no ticking gas pump, just his pulse. In his ears. He reached out. Fingers brushed the glossy edge. Pulled the magazine free. Pages flipped under his hands, fast, headlines, bullet points. Terms like venture capital, board scandal, market collapse rumors. And photos. Her, in conference rooms, on stages, holding microphones, cutting ribbons, smiling, always smiling. His jaw tightened, not from anger, not yet, just something heavier. Something slower. He closed the magazine, held it at his side, stared out the smeared glass window toward the RV. There she was, still crouched by the side panel, still in that faded gray sweater, still her, but now. Now his mind couldn't stop layering the two versions, the one in the photo and the one in front of him. A tiny voice in his head whispered, "You thought you knew her." And maybe he hadn't known anything at all. The bell above the door jingled again. Sophie came skipping in, plastic bottle of orange juice in hand. "Dad, they have gummy worms too. Can I—" Her voice faded the second she saw his face. Her small smile tipped sideways. "Dad, you okay?" Ray blinked, looked down at her, tried to soften his expression, almost managed. "Yeah," he said, voice lower than usual. "Yeah. Grab the worms, kiddo." Sophie nodded, bouncing away, content with permission. Ray's fingers tightened on the magazine, knuckles pale. Then he slid it under his arm, walked slowly toward the register. Not because he wanted to buy it, not because he knew what he was going to do with it, but because, once you've seen the truth, you can't unsee it. Back at the van, the gas pump clicked once, twice, then fell silent. Ray slid the nozzle back into place, tightened the cap with one hand. The other still gripped the magazine. He didn't look at it anymore, didn't need to. The image was burned into his mind now, sharper than anything he wanted. He opened the passenger door, glanced inside. Sophie's backpack was tossed carelessly onto the seat, the corners of the last turn sign poking out. For a long moment, he just stood there, then deliberate, slow. He opened the glove compartment, shoved the magazine deep inside, beneath old receipts, a cracked road map, a flashlight that hadn't worked in years but stayed there anyway. Slammed it shut, out of sight. But not gone. He exhaled, long, heavy. When he looked up, he caught sight of Sophie near the edge of the lot, kneeling, laughing. At first, he couldn't tell what had her so entertained. Then he saw it, a dog, skinny, scrappy. One ear folded weirdly, the other standing up like an antenna. Fur matted in places, but eyes, bright, curious. Sophie was holding out half a granola bar, palm flat. The dog inched closer, tail wagging low, cautious but tempted. Ray's instinct pulled tight half a second away from calling her back, telling her not to touch strays, not to risk it. But he didn't. Instead, he leaned against the side of the van, arms crossed. Just watching. Sophie's voice carried, soft but cheerful. It's okay. See? No tricks. The dog crept forward, nose twitched, took the bar in one quick motion, then backed up 3 steps. But didn't run. Sophie giggled. Told you! Ray's gaze softened. Kids had that strange, relentless kind of trust. A belief that if you held out your hand long enough, something good might happen. Even if it didn't before. Even if it almost never did. His fingers tapped against his elbow. Not restless, just thinking. The RV sat across the lot. Elena wasn't visible, probably inside. Maybe still pretending to check something. Or maybe just hiding. He wasn't sure which anymore. Or maybe it was him who was hiding now. The image of her on that magazine cover flashed again. Not the woman he'd met by accident. Not the woman crouched in the dirt last night, carefully arranging pebbles into a crooked star. But both were real, weren't they? Ray rubbed a hand down his jaw, felt the rough stubble catch against his palm. What did he expect? A stranger shows up, kind, funny, lost in all the right ways. And somehow that means she has no past, no story before this? He glanced back at Sophie. The dog was sitting now, just sitting, watching her. Head tilted, like it was trying to decide the same thing Ray was. He pushed off the van, walked around to the driver's side, opened the door, sat, hands on the wheel, eyes forward, but he didn't start the engine, didn't turn the key, just sat for a long time, because sometimes moving on isn't the hard part. Sometimes it's deciding if you really want to. The wheel trembled just a little in his hands. Not from nerves, not quite. Maybe it was just the road, or maybe something else. Ray stared down the long stretch of highway ahead, straight, endless. A line of cracked asphalt stitched through the middle of nowhere. He could keep going. It would be easier, cleaner, safer. Drive west, find another town, another job, another gas station where no one knew him. Or her, start fresh again. But his hands didn't turn that way. Instead, they shifted. One slow, deliberate motion. The right blinker clicked to life, a quiet, steady rhythm. Tick, tick, tick. Ray eased the van onto the shoulder. Gravel crunched beneath the tires. The steering wheel turned beneath his fingers, firm, certain. And just like that, the front end swung around, nose pointed back toward the direction they'd come from, toward the rest stop. Toward her. Sophie leaned forward from the back seat, fingers gripping the headrest. Dad! Are we going back? Ray didn't answer at first, just let the van roll forward, easing onto the highway, the tires finding their line, then quiet, steady. Yeah, kiddo, we are. Why? Her voice was small, not scared, just curious. Ray's hands tightened on the wheel, not tense, just holding steady. Because He breathed out slowly. Sometimes, you don't get answers by driving away from things. The words hung there, unfinished, honest. Sophie nodded like that made perfect sense. Outside, the desert unfolded, vast, open, 100 shades of gold and rust and dry green. Mountains rose in the far distance, blue-gray, like shadows someone forgot to erase. The road shimmered ahead. Heat waves danced in lazy patterns, making the horizon blur and bend. There was a kind of silence out here that didn't exist anywhere else. Not empty, not dead, just wide. The kind of quiet that asks you questions you've been avoiding. Ray drove, one hand on the wheel. The other tapped a slow rhythm against his thigh. Mile marker 42, then 41, then 40, each one a little closer. His eyes flicked to the rear view now and then, not because he was worried, just reflex, a habit built from too many years of always needing an exit. But not this time. This time. Forward was the way back. Sophie leaned against the window, watching. Her breath fogged little circles onto the glass before the sun burned them away. The road dipped, curved, rose again. In the distance he could see it, faint at first. That crooked old sign, a faded picnic table, a shape he recognized too well now. The white curve of her RV, parked beneath the same stubborn patch of trees, still there, still waiting. Ray's grip tightened, loosened, then settled. No backing out now. Didn't mean he had the right words, didn't mean he knew what he was walking into. But some things deserved being faced, no matter how much easier it would have been to keep driving. The van rumbled down the last stretch of road. Gravel kicked up beneath the tires. Dust spiraled in lazy swirls behind them. As the engine idled, Ray sat there for a moment, both hands resting on the wheel, looking, thinking, wondering if turning around was the hard part or if it was what came next. The morning sun cut sharp lines through the clouds, laying stripes of gold and shadow across the gravel. Elena sat cross-legged by the edge of the picnic area, fingers brushing over the rough surface of a small, smooth stone. It was the last piece of the pebble star Sophie had made. Most of it had scattered, washed out by wind, or kicked aside by careless feet. Only this one, this round, pale gray stone, sat right where Sophie had pressed it in. Elena turned it over in her palm, once, twice. The edges fit perfectly against the curve of her thumb. How something so simple could feel so heavy. The RV loomed behind her, quiet, doors shut, curtains half drawn. It felt less like a fortress today, less like armor. She stared down at the dusty ground, tracing the faint outline where the star had been. It wasn't really there anymore, just a ghost of it, a memory, kind of like her, a memory of someone she used to be, or maybe someone she never really was. Her eyes drifted toward the highway. No cars, no noise, just that long, endless stretch of road, a line drawn by someone who didn't know where it ended. Her chest tightened. What was she even waiting for? For them to come back? For them to stay gone? For the world to figure itself out? Or for her to finally stop running? Her thumb rolled the stone again. A small movement. Quiet, almost meaningless, but not quite. Because the truth was, she wasn't sure if she wanted them to come back, or if the not knowing felt safer. A breeze kicked up, warm, dry. It ruffled her hair, tugged at the cuff of her sweater, carried the faint smell of dust, pine, and maybe something cooking, far off in some place she'd never been. She closed her eyes, breathed in, let herself imagine just for a second what it would have been like, if none of the past mattered, If she were just a woman, sitting at a rest stop, watching a kid build a star, sharing a bad meal under good company, no Forbes covers, no boardrooms, no headlines, just that. She opened her eyes. The stone sat warm in her palm now, not heavy anymore. "Still here, huh?" she murmured to it. The words weren't for the stone, they weren't even for Sophie or Ray. They were for her, because for the first time in longer than she could remember, she wasn't thinking about the next move, the next deal, the next way to outrun whatever was chasing her. She was just here. And it was terrifying, and it was something close to peaceful, far off, in the distance. The faint hum of an engine broke the silence. Not loud, not close yet, but coming. Elena didn't turn toward the sound, not yet. Her fingers tightened around the stone one last time. Then, carefully, she placed it back on the dirt, right where it had been, right where it still belonged. The engine hum grew louder. Elena didn't move. She sat still, cross-legged, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the line of dirt and gravel in front of her. But her heart stood up. Tires crunched, dust kicked up in lazy swirls. The familiar shape of the old minivan rolled into view, slowing as it pulled into the same spot it had left hours ago. It stopped, engine idling for a moment, then silence. The driver's door creaked open. Sophie tumbled out first. No hesitation, no pause. She sprinted, arms wide, boots kicking up little clouds of dust behind her. "Elena!" Her voice broke through the quiet like sunlight breaking clouds. "Wait! Wait!" Elena blinked, stood before she even realized she was moving. Sophie barreled into her legs, not a hug, not exactly, more like an announcement, a declaration that we came back. We're here. Elena smiled, wide, fragile, real. "Hey, star builder," she managed, voice softer than she meant. Sophie was already digging into the pocket of her jacket, little fingers fumbling. "I made you something," she said, breathless. So, so you don't forget." She pulled it out, opened her palm. It was one of the smooth, pale stones from the star they'd built. Only now, it had changed. The surface was painted, rough, messy, streaked with brush lines, but clear, bold, in crooked, careful letters, still finding the way. Beneath it, a little arrow, pointing forward. Elena stared. Her throat tightened. Not because it was perfect, but because it wasn't. The edges were smudged. Some of the paint had bled. The arrow tilted slightly sideways, but it was honest. More honest than anything anyone had given her in years. She knelt, took the stone, held it like it was something precious, something breakable. "Thank you," she whispered. This is the best thing anyone's ever given me." Sophie grinned, shrugged. "It's just a rock." Elena shook her head. "No, it's not." Her fingers traced the letters, the arrow, the tiny flecks of blue Sophie had painted around the edges like little stars. Behind them, the van door shut, quiet. Ray stood there, not leaning, not pacing, just standing, hands in his pockets, watching. His eyes met Elena's. Neither spoke. Not yet. But something softened, cracked, not broken, just opened. Sophie glanced between them. Then, with the perfect instinct that only kids seem to have, she stepped back, wandered toward the picnic table, found a stick, started drawing circles in the dirt, leaving space without ever being asked. Elena stood, slowly, stone still in her hand. Her voice was quiet, careful. "You didn't have to come back." Ray nodded, once. "I know." The wind tugged at the hem of her sweater, carried the scent of sun-warmed dust. She swallowed, looked down at the stone, then back at him. "I'm still figuring it out," she said. "All of it. where I'm going, who I am now. Ray's mouth pulled into something that wasn't quite a smile, but wasn't far from it either. Yeah, he said. Me too. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It wasn't waiting for anyone to fill it. It just was. Like the sky, like the road, like the way some people show up in your life. And you don't know if they're meant to stay, but for now, they're here. And maybe that's enough. Elena turned the stone over one last time in her palm. Let the sunlight catch on the messy paint. The words. Still finding the way. Yeah, maybe that was the point all along. Ray didn't move. Not forward, not back. He just stood, hands deep in his pockets, shoulders set but not tense, like a man who knew the road could turn either way and for once wasn't afraid to wait. Elena took a slow step, then another. Her boots brushed gravel, quiet as a whisper. When she reached him, she didn't speak. Didn't need to. Their eyes met. No questions left. No answers owed. Just a kind of quiet understanding that only happens when two people stop running. Her lips curved, soft, small. A smile that wasn't sure of itself but offered anyway. Ray's mouth tugged in return. Not wide, not loud, but real, solid. Sophie peeked up from where she was crouched, still tracing shapes in the dirt with her stick. Her face lit. "Are we gonna eat now?" she asked, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. Ray huffed a half laugh. Yeah, kiddo. I think we are." Elena glanced at the old picnic table. Weathered, faded. The wood splintered at the edges. It wasn't fancy, wasn't even fully level, but it was enough. The three of them moved together, not rushed, not awkward. Just a rhythm that found itself without trying. Sophie scrambled onto the bench, swinging her legs. Her backpack thunked down beside her. The corner of the painted stone poking out like a secret only she knew. Elena brushed her hands down the front of her sweater, slid onto the seat opposite Sophie. Ray sat beside her. Not too close, not too far, the kind of distance that says, "I'm here," no pressure, no rush. The wind picked up. Just enough to stir the air, just enough to make the little metal charm hanging from the corner of the RV. That simple, dented silver star sway. It spun slowly. Caught the sunlight. Reflected tiny flashes of gold against the table. None of them commented on it, but all of them saw it. Elena reached into the small cooler she'd left by the door, pulled out a mismatched set of things. Bread, cheese. A jar of pickles that rattled against the plastic lid. Nothing fancy, nothing planned. Ray added the last 2 granola bars from the van. Sophie lined up paper cups like it was fine china. It wasn't a feast, it wasn't supposed to be. It was enough. They ate, quiet, slow. No rush to fill the silence. No need to explain the hours before, or the reasons for turning around. Because sometimes sitting down was the answer. Not knowing, not deciding, not fixing, just sitting, together. The wind tugged at Sophie's hair, sending loose strands across her cheeks. She wrinkled her nose, laughing, and tucked them behind her ear. "Hey," she said, pointing at the star charm still spinning. "Look, it's moving." Elena followed her gaze. Her smile grew. Yeah, it is." Ray leaned back slightly, one hand draped along the back of the bench, the other resting on the table. For a moment, he wasn't thinking about tomorrow, or the next town, or the job that might not come, or the magazine still shoved deep in the glove box. None of that, just this, the sunlight, the wind, the quiet company of people who somehow, against odds, had become something like family. Maybe temporary, maybe not. The star charm spun again, slow, steady, a little battered, a little crooked, but still hanging, still here just like them. The wind shifted, the little silver star hanging from the RV's awning swayed gently, catching the sunlight one last time. They didn't promise anything. No big words, no dramatic goodbyes, just three people sitting together at an old picnic table. Sharing bread, sharing quiet, sharing whatever this was, and whatever it might become. Sometimes that's all anyone really needs. If this story made you pause, made you breathe a little softer, maybe leave a like, or subscribe for more stories about ordinary kindness and the quiet ways people save each other. Until next time, keep finding your way.